At the red light, I saw my mother begging on the street with my son in her arms. I asked her, "Where is the house? And what happened to all the money I sent? Why didn't you get it?" It turned out that my husband and my mother-in-law had stolen everything, and all this time, they had been sending me fake photos. Before the story begins, please hit the like button, comment that you're here, and what city you're reading from. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos. Ready to listen until the end? Let's start the story. My name is Lucy Foster. Today was the day I had been waiting for the most over the last 5 years. I had finally returned to the United States. The hot city air and the horrendous traffic on the streets of Los Angeles didn't diminish my happiness in the slightest. Inside the air-conditioned cab slowly pulling away from LAX, I couldn't stop looking at my phone screen. There were dozens of photos sent by my husband, Derek Nelson. For 5 years, I worked as a private immigrant caregiver in Switzerland. I remembered how hard my struggle was overseas, taking care of the elderly, bathing them, cleaning up after them, barely sleeping, and often eating only leftovers just to save money. I endured all that exhaustion for one single goal. Every month, without fail, I sent thousands of dollars to Derek. The agreement was clear. That money was to build our dream home, pay for the education and food of my only son, Hunter, and cover the expenses of my parents, Anthony and Teresa, as well as my mother-in-law, Rosemary. Derek, I miss Hunter so much. Let's do a FaceTime call. Just for a little bit, I had texted him a few weeks before my return. Derek's response back then was quick, but as always, full of excuses. "Oh, honey, your mom has a headache. You know Teresa gets overwhelmed and stressed looking at the phone screen. She says it makes her dizzy, and Hunter is taking a nap. I'll send you new pictures tomorrow." It was always the same excuse. Sometimes it was bad cell reception at the house, or that my parents didn't know how to use technology and were afraid of the camera, or that Hunter was just too fussy. I was so stupid that I believed him for years. Derek always spoke in such a soft tone. It seemed impossible for him to lie. The proof was that every month he sent me photos of my dad, my mom, and Hunter smiling happily on the porch of a spectacular house. The house built from my sweat. The cab slowly came to a halt. The light turned red at a massive, congested intersection on Wilshire Boulevard. The sound of honking cars mixed with the exhaust fumes. I looked out the cab window to observe the hustle and bustle of the city streets I had missed so much. There were street vendors, musicians, and kids on the sidewalk. However, my gaze suddenly locked onto one specific direction. On the sidewalk, right under the scorching sun, 2 elderly people sat on the concrete. Their clothes were extremely worn, dirty, and ragged. The old man leaned on a rotting wooden cane, his legs looking swollen. Meanwhile, the old woman held a small child in her arms who looked dangerously thin. The boy's skin was dull from the sun, his eyes lifeless from malnutrition. The old woman extended a used plastic cup toward every driver that stopped. I narrowed my eyes. My heart pounded furiously, as if an invisible hammer were violently striking my chest. That worn linen shirt the old man was wearing, it was the gift I gave my father before I left for Switzerland. The wrinkled face of that older woman reaching her hand out. I knew it perfectly, and that frail little boy had the exact same birthmark behind his ear. "Mom, Dad," I murmured without realizing it. My voice shook violently. "What's wrong, ma'am?" the cab driver asked, looking at me through the rearview mirror. "Stop. Unlock the door." I screamed hysterically. The driver jumped. "Lady, we're in the middle of the street. The light's about to turn green. It's dangerous." I didn't care. I threw a $50 bill into the front seat and forced the cab door open. The horns of the cars behind me started blaring furiously because my door was open in the middle of traffic, but my ears were deaf to it. My legs trembled as I ran, dodging cars. The hot air burned my skin instantly, but the burning in my eyes was far more painful. My tears were already flowing like a river. "Mom! Dad!" I screamed with all my might, ignoring the stunned looks of dozens of people on the boulevard. The old woman startled, lowered her plastic cup, and slowly turned her head toward me. Her tired eyes narrowed, trying to recognize my silhouette standing amidst the dust and exhaust fumes. A second later, the plastic cup fell from her hand onto the asphalt. The coins inside scattered across the street. "Lucy." My mother's voice sounded hoarse, trembling, almost like a desperate whisper. "Mom. Oh my God, Mom." I ran and hugged her. I didn't care about her dirty clothes, the smell of sweat, or the street grime clinging to her body. I hugged her fragile frame with all my strength. My father, sitting next to her, broke down crying instantly. His violently shaking hand reached out to stroke my head. "My sweet girl, you've come back. My girl. Good Lord, my daughter has come back." I released my embrace for a moment and looked at the boy in my mother's lap. He looked at me with huge, empty eyes. His cheeks, which used to be chubby, were now sunken. His collarbones protruded under an old, baggy, hole-ridden t-shirt. "Mom, is this Hunter?" I asked, my voice cracking. I touched my son's cheek. It felt rough and hot. He didn't even respond to my voice. He just looked at me with confusion and fear. My mother nodded rapidly, tears flooding the wrinkles on her cheeks. She hugged Hunter tightly, as if terrified someone would snatch him away that very second. Anger, confusion, and pain swirled in my head, driving me almost insane. "Why, Mom? Why is my son so skinny? Why are you on the street begging at a red light?" I shouted over the noise of the traffic. My mother just shook her head, crying harder, unable to answer. "Where is our dream house that I paid for, Mom? Where are the thousands of dollars I sent Derek every month? Why aren't you living in that house? Why are you starving like this?" I asked relentlessly. Hearing Derek's name, the expression on my parents' faces changed drastically. It was no longer sadness, but absolute terror. My mother grabbed my arm tightly. Her eyes went wide with panic. She looked around cautiously, as if someone were watching us from afar. "Quiet, Lucy. Don't mention Derek's name here, honey," my mother whispered, her voice trembling with fear. "If one of his goons hears us and tells him, they'll kill Hunter. Lucy, they'll hurt my grandson." My mother's words were like a lightning bolt in a clear sky that completely incinerated my sanity. Kill. Goons. What did this mean? Wasn't Derek the loving man who always whispered sweet nothings to me over the phone? The light turned green. Vehicles began moving, honking as they saw us still huddled on the narrow median separating the lanes. "Get up, Mom. Dad, let's go. We're leaving right now. Get in an Uber," I said firmly, taking Hunter from my mother's lap. My son felt extremely light when I picked him up, which tore my heart to shreds all over again. His weight was completely abnormal for a boy his age. I helped my dad up, supporting him as we walked toward a rideshare car that had pulled over to wait for us. As soon as we got in and the doors closed, the noise of the street faded, replaced by my parents' sobs in the back seat. I sat in the front, holding Hunter, who finally rested his head against my chest. The sour smell and sweat on his body were the physical proof of a long suffering I had known nothing about. "Drive. Take us to any safe, clean motel far away from this area," I ordered the driver. The car sped off, leaving that cursed intersection behind. I looked at my phone screen again. At that precise moment, a text from Derek came through. "Hey babe, here's a picture of your parents eating. Hunter is playing in his room. Everyone is super healthy. Just focus on your work over there. Love you." Attached to the message was a photo, a picture of my parents wearing clean, elegant clothes, sitting stiffly and smiling at a dining table full of delicious food. I turned my head back, looking at my parents dressed in rags, crying in terror and shivering in the corner of the back seat. I looked back at the phone screen and squeezed it tightly. The illusion of happiness I had believed in for so long shattered without a trace. It turned out my husband wasn't human. He was a monster who had manipulated me. I swore I would expose his rot and take back everything that belonged to me. The car finally stopped in front of a modest place called the Rest Haven Motel on the outskirts of the city. The place was a bit hidden, far from the main highway's hustle, and most importantly, it didn't draw attention. I paid the fare with a $20 bill, told him to keep the change, and hurried my family into the lobby. After renting an isolated room at the back, I took them inside immediately. As soon as I locked the door, the cool air from the AC brushed our skin. However, instead of feeling relieved, my parents stood rigidly near the door, looking at each other with guilty expressions. "Sit down, Mom, Dad." "Sit on the bed. Rest," I said as I dropped my backpack on the dresser. My dad gently shook his head, looking down at the clean carpet. "No. Our clothes are too dirty. We smell like the street. If we stain the bed, The motel owner will make you pay for damages." Hearing those words, my tears, which had just stopped, flowed again. The man who had always taught me about dignity and honor now felt too despicable even to sit on a cheap motel bed. "What are you saying, Dad? This is our room. I paid for it. If it gets dirty or breaks, I'm responsible." I pulled my father's arm, forcing him to sit on the edge of the bed. My mother hesitantly followed. She was still hugging Hunter tightly, as if the boy were the only treasure she had left in the world. "Mom, let go of Hunter for a second. Let me bathe him. His body is burning up and covered in dirt. You rest first. I've already ordered food on DoorDash. It'll be here soon," I said softly. My mother finally released her grip. I carried Hunter into the bathroom. My son, who used to be chubby and cheerful, now remained completely silent. His gaze was empty, as if his soul had been ripped out by the harsh asphalt of the streets. Inside the bathroom, when I took off the old t-shirt clinging to his tiny body, I broke down crying without making a sound. I pressed my lips tightly together so my parents wouldn't hear my sobs outside. My God. My son's body was just skin stretched over bones. His ribs were far too visible. There were mosquito bites, red rashes, and several dried scratches on his legs and arms. "It hurts, Mommy," Hunter murmured softly, almost inaudibly, when the warm water from the shower head touched a scrape on his shoulder. That word "mommy" tore down the rest of my defenses. I hugged his soaking wet little body under the stream of water, kissing the crown of his head over and over. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. Mommy promises that, starting today, no one will ever dare hurt you again. I promise." After I finished bathing Hunter, I put him in one of my t-shirts, which obviously swallowed him whole since I hadn't had time to buy them fresh clothes yet. Shortly after, there was a knock on the door. The food I ordered had arrived. 3 large portions of fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and mac and cheese. I opened the containers and offered them to my dad and mom. The scene that followed was truly heartbreaking. My parents ate with ravenous desperation. They chewed the meat as if they hadn't seen decent food in days. My mother even fed Hunter with trembling hands while my son devoured everything, making a mess of his face. I didn't eat. The hunger in my stomach had been replaced by nausea mixed with boiling rage. I just sat on a wooden chair, watching them until not a single crumb was left. Once they finished eating and drank some water, I pulled my chair closer, looking directly at my parents. Their faces started to look a bit more relaxed, although the remnants of fear still lurked in their eyes. "Now," I said in a soft but firm tone, "I want you to tell me everything from the beginning. Don't hide anything from me. Why were you thrown out? Why does Hunter look like this? And why didn't you ever go to the police or a neighbor?" My mother looked down, wringing the hem of her ragged clothes. My father let out a long sigh, a sigh that sounded very heavy and full of despair. "It all changed 3 months after you left for Switzerland, sweetie," my dad started, his voice raspy. "Derek started coming home late. Out of the monthly money you sent, he never gave your mother a single cent for groceries. If we asked, he said it was to save up and buy construction materials for the house. But one night, he brought another woman to our rented apartment. Her name was Valerie." I clenched my fists tightly. Valerie. I would remember that name. "I got so angry," my dad continued. "I reminded him he had a wife breaking her back working overseas. But Derek went crazy. He beat me until I fell to the floor. Then your mother-in-law, Rosemary, joined in and cursed us out. That same night, they threw our things out on the street. Derek took our IDs, our social security cards, and all our important documents. And why did you take Hunter? Why didn't Derek keep his own son?" I asked in a sharp, restrained tone. "Derek didn't want to deal with a crying kid," my mom answered, this time between sobs. "Your mother-in-law said Hunter was a burden, that he would only cause problems for Valerie if they wanted to have fun. So that same night, they threw my grandson out on the street with us. Then why didn't you scream for help from the neighbors? Why didn't you borrow someone's phone to call the LAPD, or at least my international number?" "Dad," I started to lose control. My logic couldn't accept that they had just resigned themselves like this for years. Hearing my question, my mother's body shook violently again. My father looked at me with red, pain-filled eyes. Do you think we didn't want to, honey? My dad's voice trembled uncontrollably. The afternoon after we were kicked out, I was on my way to the police station. But halfway there, a tattooed thug blocked our path. His name was Ray, a hired goon paid by Derek. My dad paused, swallowing hard as if it pained him to continue. That guy, Ray, snatched Hunter from your mother's arms. He pulled out a switchblade, sweetie, and put it right to your son's neck. He said, if you dare open your mouths to the cops, to the neighbors, or tell your daughter in Switzerland, I'll slit this kid's throat and dump his body in the river. I felt the blood stop flowing through my veins. My eyes widened, staring at my father. We are poor old people, Lucy. No IDs, no money, no one. If we risked reporting it to the cops, there was no guarantee they'd believe us. But that blade would have torn your son's neck open for sure. Derek had a lot of money thanks to your transfers. He could pay any thug to kill us, my mother sobbed, hugging Hunter again, who had fallen into a deep sleep on the bed from having a full stomach. That's why we kept quiet. We had to beg, sleep on the streets, and eat garbage, just so the two of us could keep protecting our grandson, keep him alive until you came back. That explanation slapped my sanity with tremendous force. This was the reason. Not because they were stupid, not because they had given up, but because they were held hostage by the most brutal terror. Derek, that son of a bitch, used the life of his own flesh and blood as collateral to keep his crimes safe. I stood up from the chair, walked over to the motel room window, and looked out into the darkness of the night. My tears had dried, replaced by the embers of wrath burning in my chest. All my love, my longing, and my devotion as a wife died tonight, buried deep alongside my family's suffering. From now on, you don't have to be afraid anymore, I said without looking back. My voice sounded so cold, even I surprised myself hearing it. There will be no more Ray. There will be no more Derek. There will be no more switchblades at my son's throat. What are you going to do, honey? Don't do anything crazy. Your husband is evil, my dad whispered with concern. I'm going to get revenge on them, Dad. In a way 1,000 times more painful than a simple knife, I replied firmly. Tomorrow morning, I'll start making moves. I need hard proof of where the hundreds of thousands of dollars I sent over these 5 years went. And I know exactly who the first person I need to contact is. My old friend who works at the bank, Lauren. The game had just begun, Derek. And believe me, I will be the one writing the ending to this story. Morning arrived quietly in the small room at the Rest Haven Motel. The sun peeked through a tear in the corner of the curtain, shining directly onto my son's face. I had been awake since 4 a.m., sitting against the wall, my eyes never leaving the 3 people I loved most in the world. They were still fast asleep. Hunter's breathing sounded more regular than last night, although he occasionally babbled softly, seeking the warmth of the blanket. On the adjacent bed, my mom and dad slept back to back, looking utterly exhausted. I stood up slowly, making sure the floorboards didn't creak. Before they woke up, I ordered an Uber and made a quick trip to the nearest Target. I bought clean clothes, sandals, toiletries, and some hot breakfast sandwiches and soup. I threw all their ragged clothes into the dumpster outside the motel. Those garments were silent witnesses to their suffering, and I never wanted to see them again. When I got back and woke them up, they cried tears of joy again. My mother couldn't stop saying thank you as she put on the new cotton robe I bought her. Although they weren't expensive, my dad stroked his new sandals as if they were designer leather shoes. And my son, Hunter, smiled a little when I gave him the soup, although he remained very quiet and clung to me constantly. Mom, Dad, I need to go out for a bit today to see a friend, I said while brushing Hunter's hair. Lock the room door from the inside. Don't open it for anyone, unless you hear my voice. I've left some snacks and water on the table. Do not leave this room. Understood? My dad nodded quickly. Yes, sweetie. Be very careful. Don't be reckless. At 10 a.m., I left the motel, activated my old WhatsApp number that only my closest friends knew, and called Lauren. Lauren had been my best friend since high school. She never judged my social status. Even when I decided to leave for Switzerland 5 years ago, Lauren was the one who cried the hardest at LAX. Now, she worked in a fairly strategic position at a major private bank in downtown LA. Hello? Lucy? Is this really your number? Lauren's voice came through high-pitched, a mix of surprise and joy. Yeah, Lauren, it's me. I'm back in the States. I answered quietly. Oh my gosh! Why didn't you tell anyone? Goodness, I'm so happy. Your husband Derek must be jumping for joy in your new house. Where are you right now? When can we meet? Lauren blurted out enthusiastically. Hearing Derek's name and the mention of the new house in such a cheerful tone made my chest tighten again. I swallowed hard, trying to stabilize my voice. Lauren, I need your help. I need it desperately. Can we meet at noon at the coffee shop across from your office? Don't tell anyone I'm back, especially Derek's family. Lauren's tone turned serious instantly. She seemed to catch that something was very wrong by the tremor in my voice. Okay. At noon, that's my lunch break. I'll wait for you in the back booth at our usual spot. Are you okay, Lucy? I'll tell you everything later, I replied before hanging up. Exactly at noon, I was already sitting in the corner booth of the empty coffee shop. Lauren arrived 5 minutes later in her impeccable business suit. Upon seeing me, she practically ran over and hugged me tightly. However, the hug didn't last long because she quickly noticed my swollen eyes and tense face. What's wrong, Lucy? Why are you so pale? Lauren sat across from me, her face full of anxiety. Without beating around the bush, I told her about the horrific events I had encountered at the red light the afternoon before. I told her about my dad, my mom, and Hunter, starving, kicked out of their home, and threatened with death by Derek's hired thug. I told her everything without adding or removing a single detail. Lauren covered her mouth with both hands. Tears welled up in her eyes, slightly smudging her mascara. Oh my God. Lucy, Lord above, what a sick son of a bitch. Derek is a monster. And how is your son now? They're safe. They're secure in the motel, I replied coldly, because my tears had already run dry the night before. But I can't just sit here with my arms crossed, Lauren. I need proof to destroy him. Before I left for Switzerland, I opened a savings account at the bank where you work, right? The account is in my name. But the debit card, the checkbook, and the mobile banking access are held by Derek, with the excuse that it would be easier for him to withdraw money to pay the contractors and for house materials. Lauren nodded quickly. Yes. I remember you signing the account opening paperwork at my desk. Can you help me print the statements for that account from the last 5 years? I'm the legal owner of the account, Lauren. I have my original ID. I need to know where the hundreds of thousands of dollars I sent him every month ended up. Derek always said the money was to buy land, materials, and pay off other loans. Yes, absolutely. Since you're the client and you have your ID, it's your absolute right, Lauren affirmed firmly. She immediately opened her briefcase, pulled out a small laptop and a special bank security reader. I've been suspicious for a while, Lucy, but I didn't dare say anything because I was afraid of being accused of meddling in someone else's marriage. Suspicious of what? I demanded answers. Remember when I asked you once about Derek's sudden, flashy lifestyle? He was always posting pictures in luxury places. Well, it turns out our bank systems are connected. Look at this. Lauren typed quickly on her laptop, accessing the database, and then turned the screen toward me. On the screen, the graphs and list of transactions for my account were clearly visible. Lauren pointed to one of the columns. Every time your wire transfer arrived, the very next day it disappeared, Lucy. He would withdraw the maximum amount in cash from the ATM, and he transferred the rest to another bank account. Who did he transfer it to? I squinted closely at the screen. Lauren zoomed in on an account under the name Valerie. Valerie, the name of the woman my father mentioned last night. My husband's mistress. The muscles in my jaw tensed until my teeth ground together. The money earned bathing seniors in Switzerland. The money I saved by skipping meals ended up being used to fund some tramp living off my husband. What's the total amount that's gone to that woman, Lauren? I asked coldly. Accumulated over these 5 years. Almost $200,000, Lucy, Lauren replied softly, as if terrified of hurting my heart even more. And the worst part is, your money was never used to pay a mortgage in your name. Then whose is that massive house he always sent me pictures of? Lauren sighed deeply. It's a house in Derek Nelson's name. He faked his employment records and applied for a mortgage at a predatory lender, laundering the wire transfers you sent as his own legitimate income to pay the down payment and monthly installments. He's very slippery, Lucy. So the bank system wouldn't track that you were the one paying. He took the cash out first and then deposited it into his own mortgage account. A sudden wave of dizziness hit me. My husband's plan was perfect. He robbed me blind, built an estate in his name, and left his own flesh and blood begging on the streets. Just as silence fell over our booth, the phone in my purse buzzed a long time. An incoming call, followed by a WhatsApp message from Derek. I opened the message and placed it on the table so Lauren could read it too. Good morning, my beautiful wife. Sorry I'm texting late. This morning I was busy buying your dad those pancakes he loves so much. Here are your mom and dad having breakfast on the front porch. Hunter is playing his PlayStation in the living room. Keep up the hard work over there, babe. We're almost done paying off our dream car. Beneath that string of lies was an attached photo, a picture of my parents wearing clean, stylish clothes, sitting stiffly on luxurious wicker chairs on a porch, holding mugs and plates. My father's face seemed to be smiling, but it was an extremely tense, terrifying smile, like someone having a gun pointed at them. Lauren gasped as she read the message. Her hands shook as she covered her mouth. He's crazy. He's a psychopath, Lucy. Your parents had breakfast with you this morning at the motel, right? Where did this photo come from? How are your parents on his porch? This is his sick, twisted plan, Lauren, I hissed, feeling the blood boiling up to my head. He forces my parents to smile under the threat of a knife just to send me the picture. After taking it, they strip them of the nice clothes and kick them back out onto the street. Lauren cried hearing that. She softly pounded her fist on the table. Put him in jail, Lucy. Let's put that bastard in jail. I looked at the photo on the screen with a dead gaze. Sadness no longer had a place in my heart. Everything had transformed into pure, cold, lethal hatred. I will put him in jail, Lauren. But before that, I want to gather all the evidence until I leave him gasping for air in the courtroom, I said firmly. I looked at Lauren. Can you get me the exact address of the house with the mortgage in Derek's name? This afternoon, I need to see with my own eyes the palace that son of a bitch built with my sweat. Lauren nodded decisively, without a shred of doubt. I'll write the address down for you right now. The game was entering its investigation phase. Very soon, I would be knocking on the doors of your hell, Derek. The address Lauren gave me led to an exclusive gated community in the suburbs of the city, in Calabasas. The Oaks Estates read a large golden sign at the main entrance. The security was quite strict, with automatic barriers and several uniformed guards. I didn't dare take an Uber inside. I got out at a strip mall across the street. I bought a black baseball cap and a medical mask to hide my face and crossed on foot. I slipped through a side pedestrian gate, tailing a group of housekeepers returning from grocery shopping. My heart pounded. My steps felt heavy, as if I were dragging tons of weight. In my hand, the piece of paper with the block and house number was soaked in cold sweat. Block D. Number 8. I stopped right behind a large, leafy palm tree on the opposite sidewalk. My eyes widened as I looked at the building towering arrogantly before me. It wasn't just a house. It was a mini mansion. A 2-story modern classic estate painted ivory white. Its grand pillars were faced with natural stone. The wrought iron gate stood incredibly high with intricate details. Parked in the wide driveway was a brand new white SUV, a Range Rover. The car Derek had always dreamed of. The installments for which I had paid with blood and sweat washing dishes and cleaning up after seniors in Switzerland. My chest seized up. I felt like I was drowning. This was the real manifestation of my 5 years of suffering. Every time I felt my back was going to break, carrying water jugs or lifting my boss's wheelchair, Derek was stacking the bricks of his palace here. Every time I ate a plate of rice with yesterday's leftovers, Derek was lounging on a plush sofa behind those imposing walls. The iron gate was slightly open. Sitting on the front porch was a heavyset, dark-skinned man wearing a tank top that revealed a dragon tattoo on his left arm. He was smoking while looking at his phone. That tattoo, his massive size. It was Ray, the hired goon who put the blade to my son's neck. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to run over there, snatch his knife, and plunge it into his own chest, but I had to restrain myself. An explosion of emotions would ruin my grand plan. Shortly after, an Uber Black pulled up right in front of the house's gate. The tattooed man quickly put out his cigarette and ran to open the car door. Out stepped 2 women whose appearance made me see stars from suppressed fury. The first woman was my mother-in-law, Rosemary. She wore a long, bright maroon silk dress, accessorized with gold jewelry hanging from her neck and wrists. Her face was heavily made up. She was laughing loudly, looking extremely happy. Behind her stepped out a young woman with very fair, pampered skin. She wore a tight, knee-length dress, designer sunglasses, and carried bags from high-end boutiques. Her hair was dyed chestnut and perfectly straightened. The woman moved with arrogance, shoving 2 large shopping bags into Ray's chest without even looking at him. "Take these inside. Don't wrinkle them, they're expensive," the young woman ordered in a sharp tone. Ray merely nodded obediently like a trained dog. "Oh, Valerie, you spend so much." Then Derek complains that the money is disappearing. Rosemary scolded her. However, her tone wasn't angry, but rather indulging, accompanied by a chuckle. The young woman named Valerie took off her sunglasses, flipped her hair, and let out a crystal-clear laugh. "Let him be, Rosemary. After all, Derek is just days away from getting another wire from his walking ATM overseas. It's time to pay the car lease this month. It's easy. Tomorrow we'll force Derek's stupid in-laws to put on nice clothes again for the picture." Rosemary burst into laughter hearing the insult. "Yeah, that's true. The slave in Switzerland works hard to cover our whims here. Come on, let's go inside. It's boiling out here." The world around me seemed to spin. Their words were the deadliest venom. They called me a walking ATM. They called me a slave. They mocked the suffering of my parents. They partied at the expense of my son, who was starving on the street. My knees gave out. I took a few steps back, hiding further behind the palm tree, covering my mouth so my sobs wouldn't burst out right there. I had to leave before I lost my sanity and attacked them. I turned around and stumbled out of the gated community toward a working-class neighborhood that sat just behind the high walls of that exclusive enclave. I needed to sit down. I needed to drink water. On the corner of one of the streets in that neighborhood, there was a small local diner selling sandwiches and sodas. I walked into the empty diner, sat at a table, and rested my head on the surface. "What can I get you, ma'am?" greeted the voice of a middle-aged woman from behind the counter. I lifted my head slowly, pulling down my medical mask so I could breathe. "An iced tea, please." My words hung in the air when I locked eyes with the waitress. The woman, wearing an apron, widened her eyes. She dropped the knife she was using to cut bread onto the cutting board with a thud. Lucy?" she gasped. I blinked in confusion. I stared closely at the woman's face. The wrinkles on her forehead, the mole on her chin. Oh my God, it was Rosie. Rosie was my next-door neighbor in my old apartment building before I left for Switzerland. She was the one who helped me watch Hunter when I was busy with my travel paperwork. "Rosie?" I replied, almost in a whisper. "You have a diner here?" Rosie quickly rushed out from behind the counter, looked left and right in a panic, and then grabbed my arm to lead me to the most secluded booth in the back. "Quiet. Good Lord, Lucy. When did you get back? Why didn't you let anyone know?" "Don't talk too loud. This is the neighborhood behind Derek's community. If his goons find out, there could be trouble." I grabbed Rosie's hand. My look was one of pleading. You know everything that happened to my family?" Rosie's eyes filled with tears instantly. She nodded quickly. Her face reflected guilt and deep compassion. "I know. All the neighbors from the old building know too. That night, Derek caused a huge scene, bringing over that tramp named Valerie. He kicked your parents out. He threw Hunter onto the street like it was nothing. We all wanted to help, Lucy." The men in the building were about to beat Derek to a pulp, but the next day, Derek brought tattooed thugs to the complex. They threatened to burn down my diner and the homes of anyone who dared to interfere or call you. I closed my eyes, feeling a tearing pain hearing that. The terror hadn't just taken my family hostage, but everyone around them. Then why did Derek move here? Don't the neighbors in this gated community suspect who Valerie really is? I asked in a raspy voice. Rosie wiped her tears with the edge of her apron. Derek moved into that luxury community 2 years ago, Lucy. Bought the biggest house. The neighbors there think Valerie is his legal wife. Your mother-in-law, that witch Rosemary, spread lies everywhere. She told the Homeowners Association women that you were a woman of loose morals, that you ran off overseas with another man, and left him a mountain of debt. That's why Derek has to work so hard to pay off your debts. My God. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. This cruel slander was unforgivable. Derek hadn't just stolen my money, taken my home, and threatened my son's life. He had also assassinated my reputation, using me as a scapegoat to justify his luxurious life with that tramp. Lucy, where are your dad, your mom, and Hunter? They're safe, right? Rosie asked with a trembling voice. They're with me, Rosie. Last night I found them begging at a red light. My son looked like a walking skeleton. Rosie, my crying finally erupted, unable to contain the pressure in my chest any longer. Rosie hugged me from the side, crying inconsolably with me. Damn, Derek. That demon in human form? Lucy, do not let this go. You have to report him to the police. This cannot stand. If you need a witness, I am willing to help you. I will testify to the cops. I'm not afraid of his goons anymore. Rosie's declaration demonstrated a courage that made me feel I was no longer alone in this battle. I broke the hug, wiping my tears roughly. My decision was firm. I already had the bank evidence from Lauren. I had obtained an eyewitness like Rosie. Now I needed someone who could tie all this rot together. To create a lethal legal weapon, I needed a lawyer. And I knew exactly that I had to find the most ruthless one in the courts to tear Derek and his entire castle of lies to shreds. Thank you, Rosie. I will hold you to your promise, I said with a voice that now sounded firm and cold. Now give me that iced tea. I need to clear my head, because starting tomorrow, I will make them beg for mercy at my feet. The sun was starting to dip toward the west when I stepped back into the Rest Haven Motel. The afternoon air, which was normally refreshing, couldn't cool my head, which felt ready to explode. All the way back from Rosie's diner, the image of Derek's luxurious mansion, his mistress's laughter, and my mother-in-law's insults spun in my brain like a broken record. As soon as I opened the motel door, the scene that greeted me squeezed my heart again. My father was sitting cross-legged on the floor, massaging my mother's swollen feet. Meanwhile, my son Hunter was curled up on the bed hugging a pillow, fast asleep with breathing that still sounded heavy. They turned their heads toward me with looks full of hope and anxiety all at once. You're back, sweetie. You're very pale. Are you okay? My dad greeted me, getting up hurriedly to approach. I slammed the door shut and handed him the key. I dropped my purse on the table and took a deep breath to stabilize my voice. I'm fine, Dad. I was seeing an old friend and checking on some things. I walked over to them and sat on the edge of the bed, right by Hunter's feet. I gently stroked my son's hair, which was still thin and sparse from malnutrition. There was a massive question that had been weighing on my chest since noon, a cruel puzzle I had to solve today. I reached into my pants pocket and pulled out the cell phone that, for years, had been the bridge for Derek's lies. I opened WhatsApp, looking for the last photo Derek had sent me that very morning. The photo of my parents sitting on the porch of the luxurious house, eating breakfast. Mom, Dad, I called them softly. I need you to be honest again. Please don't hide anything from me, no matter how small. My mother swallowed hard, looking terrified. What is it, honey? I promise we won't lie. I held the phone screen close to their faces. If you've been on the street sleeping in doorways and begging for years, then how do these photos exist? Derek sent me this morning. You two are wearing nice clothes? Sitting in Derek's house. What was the act really like, Mom? Seeing the photo on the screen, my mother's face paled instantly. Her body shook violently. My father looked away immediately. He clenched both fists so tightly his knuckles turned white, as if containing an unbearable shame and rage. My mother started to sob, wringing her new robe. That was our hell, Lucy, the most cursed hell. Tell me everything, Mom, I begged. I didn't care if my heart was about to break all over again. Every few months, when Derek needed a lot of money and wanted to blackmail you, he'd send Ray to look for us on the streets. My mother's voice trembled, accompanied by heart-wrenching sobs. Ray would drive around the city in a windowless van. If he found us begging, he'd drag us into the vehicle by force. Inside, he would slap Hunter and he'd cry so loud. My tears fell inevitably, but I stayed quiet, letting my mother continue her torment. They'd bring us in through the back gate of that big house. Into the garage, my mother continued, her breathing erratic. Your mother-in-law, Rosemary, would be waiting there for us. She'd spray us with a thick hose, scrubbing our skin hard to get the street grime and dirt off. She said it disgusted her that we'd stain her house with our homeless filth. After that, she forced us to put on the nice clothes she had ready. My father took over the story in a hoarse voice, holding back tears. Once we were cleaned up, they'd make us sit on the porch or in the living room. In front of us, that woman, Valerie, was already waiting with her phone camera. And where was Derek? Dad, why in this picture do you look like you're smiling as if you're happy? I asked, my chest ready to burst. My father looked at me with empty eyes. Derek was standing right behind Valerie. He wasn't in the picture, but his hand was holding a switchblade that he pressed against Hunter's stomach or neck. Derek always threatened us. If you don't smile, if you look sad for the camera, I'll spill the kid's guts right now. We had to smile, Lucy. They forced us to smile from ear to ear for your son's life. Meanwhile, inside, we were screaming for help. Boom! My father's words hit my head like a sledgehammer. My stomach churned imagining that demented scene. My son, my own flesh and blood, threatened with a knife by his own father just for a fake photo, a smile born from the most lethal terror. Once they sent you the photo and Derek was satisfied, my mother added through tears. Rosemary would rip the nice clothes off us. They forced us to put our soaked rags back on. Then Ray would kick us out the back door, throwing us onto the street again. Silence immediately took over the room. The only sounds were my father and mother's sobs. I stood petrified, my gaze fixated on the phone screen, which had now gone dark. The sadness, disappointment, and pain in my heart evaporated suddenly, disappearing without a trace. In their place, a dark, cold, lethal energy crawled, filling every cell of my body. I was no longer crying. The compassionate and patient woman I used to be had been murdered by Derek that very day. I stood up with very calm movements. I grabbed my purse and looked for Lauren's contact. I pressed the call button. Hey, Lucy, how's it going? Did you see the house? Lauren answered on the other end. Yes, Lauren. I replied with a tone as cold as ice. I've seen the house, his mistress, and my mother-in-law. And I just found out that my parents' smiles in that photo are the result of having a knife at my son's throat. A muffled gasp came from Lauren. Oh my God, Lucy. They're insane. They're demons. Lauren, listen to me. I interrupted her sharply. I need a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I want the most ruthless lawyer, the smartest one, the one who shows no mercy in court. A lawyer who can strip Derek and his family down to the bone and leave nothing. Do you know someone? Lauren stayed quiet for a moment, seemingly terrified by my tone of voice. Yes. Lucy. His name is Frank Sullivan. He's a younger lawyer, but his reputation is brutal. He usually handles embezzlement and high-profile domestic violence cases. He's as sharp as a scalpel when he litigates. He's like a pit bull when he enters the courtroom. It just so happens he's a VIP client at my bank. I can give you his contact or call him myself right now to set up a meeting with you. Call him right now, Lauren. Tell him I have a case worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, with bank transfer evidence, witnesses, and a case of attempted murder of a minor. I am willing to pay whatever it takes for his services. Set up a meeting for this afternoon at the coffee shop near my motel. Okay, Lucy. I'm calling Frank Sullivan right now. Wait to hear from me. I hung up the phone. I looked at my parents, who were still trembling on the bed. I walked over to them and grabbed their wrinkled, cold hands. Mom, Dad, from this moment on, stop crying, I said with a firm voice, looking directly into their eyes. Our tears are gone. This torture is over. Now it's their turn to cry blood. That afternoon, in a small coffee shop not far from the Rest Haven Motel, I sat across from a man wearing an impeccable dress shirt and black-rimmed glasses. His face was stern, his gaze piercing and analytical. That man was Frank Sullivan. On the table, I had already laid out the documents with the bank transactions Lauren had sent me in PDF format, as well as my phone showing dozens of the happy photos crafted by the demon Derek. I told him everything from beginning to end, skipping nothing, including Rosie's testimony and the knife threat Hunter endured. During my account, Frank didn't interrupt me a single time. He just took rapid notes on his legal pad. His jaw tensed occasionally. When I finished, Frank put down his pen. He looked at me with an expression hard to decipher, a mix of respect and professional fury. Miss Foster, Frank said in his baritone voice, calm but intimidating. Your husband hasn't just committed civil offenses, but multiple criminal felonies. Embezzlement, document forgery, fraud, continuous physical and psychological abuse, and severe violations of child protection laws. I want them to rot in jail, Frank. I want the house they bought with my sweat returned to me. And I want that woman named Valerie to be as poor as a beggar again, I said without hesitation. Frank nodded slowly. A faint smile appeared at the corner of his lips, the smile of a predator that had just found easy prey. We can do this, ma'am. Lauren's bank evidence and Rosie's testimony are already rock solid for the civil route. But to ensure Derek cannot evade the charges of torture and death threats to a minor, Frank pointed to my phone screen showing the photo of my parents. We need physical proof of this coercion. If we only rely on your parents' testimony, Derek's lawyer in court could twist the facts and accuse your parents of making it up. We need a third eye. A third eye? I frowned. Yes, a silent witness, Frank replied firmly. Rosie said Derek's house is in an exclusive gated community in Calabasas, right? Those houses are usually close together. If they committed these tortures in the side or backyard of the house, Frank looked at me intently. We need to check if the next-door neighbor has security cameras pointing at the boundary wall separating their properties. My eyes widened. He was right. How had I not thought of that? In luxury communities, almost every house has cameras. If a single neighbor's camera caught Ray dragging my parents or Derek pointing the knife at them in the side yard, this game would be over instantly. Tomorrow morning, my investigative team and I will work on getting access to those cameras, Frank continued, closing his notepad. Miss Foster, prepare yourself mentally. Starting today, we're no longer defending. We're attacking. That morning felt different. The air inside the room at the rest haven no longer suffocated me. I looked at my reflection in the small, cracked mirror on the dresser. I had dark circles under my eyes. My cheeks were sunken, but my gaze radiated something new. Absolute courage. There was no trace of the weeping Lucy left. That day officially marked the beginning of my hunt to destroy Derek and all the parasites in that house. At exactly 9 a.m., the phone rang. Frank's name flashed on the screen. Hello, Frank, I greeted in a low voice so as not to wake my family. Good morning, Miss Foster. My small team and I are already at Rosie's diner. We will execute the plan this morning. Rosie says that right around this time, Derek's neighbor's housekeeper usually goes grocery shopping. It's our golden opportunity, Frank explained in a rapid, professional tone. I'm on my way right now, I replied without wasting time. After reminding my parents to lock the door tight, I called an Uber and headed to Rosie's diner. My heart pounded during the ride. All my hope rested on this plan. If those security recordings didn't exist, my position in a criminal trial would be very difficult when it came to proving the torture and attempted murder. Arriving at the somewhat hidden diner, I saw Frank sitting across from Rosie. Near them was a casually dressed young man whom Frank introduced to me as his trusted IT tech. Here's the situation, Miss Foster. Frank got straight to the point as soon as I sat down, unfolding a rough sketch of the houses on the table. Derek's house is 842 Cypress Way. Well, the neighbor immediately to the left, number 10, belongs to a businessman who is rarely home. Rosie knows his housekeeper very well. Her name is Joanne. Joanne usually grabs breakfast here. Rosie nodded, agreeing with him. It's true, Lucy. Joanne complains to me a lot about the neighbor next door. Yeah, about Derek. She says his family makes a lot of noise, that you can often hear crying in the side yard in the afternoons. Also, her boss's house is loaded with cameras on every corner, including on the dividing wall pointing directly at Derek's yard. So, how are we going to get the footage? I asked impatiently. Rosie will lure Joanne over here. Frank took over the explanation. As soon as she arrives, I'll step in. I'll show her my bar card. I'll give Joanne a small gratuity to keep quiet and ask for permission for my tech to copy the recordings from last month from her boss's server room. We aren't going to steal anything, just copy the files. The plan sounded risky, but it made a lot of sense. 10 minutes later, just as Rosie predicted, a middle-aged woman in a housekeeper's uniform approached the diner. Joanne. As soon as Joanne sat down to order her breakfast, Rosie struck up a conversation and guided her to our table. Frank played his role brilliantly. His authoritative yet polite way of speaking made Joanne, who was initially scared, calm down, especially when Frank discreetly slid a couple of crisp $100 bills into her shopping basket, claiming they were administrative expenses for witnesses. Oh, Mr. Lawyer, honestly, I'm scared my boss will yell at me, but I also feel so bad hearing that poor little boy crying next door, Joanne whispered, looking at the street cautiously. Come on, come with me. I'll sneak you in through the side gate. My boss is out of town, but hurry up, okay? I'm coming too, I interrupted quickly. Frank stopped me with a hand gesture. No, Miss Foster. If Ray or someone from Derek's family happens to see you around there, our plan will go up in smoke prematurely. Wait here with Rosie. I gave in, though I was a bundle of nerves. For almost an hour, I sat at the diner feeling useless. My hands were freezing, and my legs wouldn't stop bouncing under the table. Rosie made me a hot tea, but it tasted like nothing. My mind kept wandering to the worst-case scenarios. What if the cameras were broken? What if a tree blocked the view? Until, finally, I saw Frank and his tech walking briskly back toward the diner. Frank's face was tense, his jaw clenched. In his hand, he gripped a black USB flash drive. "Do we have it?" I asked, practically jumping out of my chair. Frank didn't answer with words. He placed his tech's laptop on the diner table, plugged in the USB, and clicked on a video file. I scrubbed the footage to the 2nd of last month. "Exactly the same date as the last photo you showed me yesterday," Frank said quietly. The laptop screen lit up. The camera's quality was crystal clear. Even the zoom function and audio were captured quite well. On the screen, you could clearly see the side yard area of Derek's house, a narrow, paved walkway flanked by high walls. Suddenly, I felt as if my heart were being brutally crushed. In the video, I saw Ray entering through the back gate, violently dragging my father by his ragged shirt. My father fell to the ground behind Ray. My mother struggled to walk while holding Hunter, who was crying in terror. "What is all this racket these homeless bums are making?" Rosemary's shrill voice echoed from inside the house. The old woman came out carrying a thick garden hose. Without any mercy, she sprayed high-pressure water at my father, my mother, and my son. "Mercy, ma'am, mercy. The boy is cold." My mother's voice sounded weak but agonizing on the recording. They were shivering, soaked like mistreated sewer rats. "Scrub yourselves good, you stink like garbage," Rosemary yelled, tossing a pile of clean clothes onto the concrete. Then Derek and Valerie appeared. Derek, my husband, the man I once considered the most tender person, stood there with a face full of hatred. Meanwhile, Valerie busied herself setting up a small tripod and positioning her phone. "Come on, put those clothes on already. Lucy is asking for this month's photo. If she doesn't cough up the cash, where are we going to get the money for the Range Rover lease?" Derek shouted crudely. My father and mother, hands trembling, were forced to change out of their wet clothes and into those elegant outfits right there in the open air. Once they sat rigidly on the patio chairs, the most demonic scene my father had recounted last night unfolded before my very eyes. Derek stepped up right behind my mother's chair, where she had Hunter on her lap. The glint of metal flashed in his hand. A switchblade. With absolute casualness, Derek pressed the tip of the blade right to the back of my son's neck. "Smile," Derek threatened in a low voice that sounded like a snake's hiss. "If you shed a single tear, I'll break this brat's neck. 1, 2, 3. On the 3rd second, my father and mother forced the fakest, most painful smiles I had ever seen. The flash from Valerie's phone went off. After that, Derek quickly pulled the knife away. Rosemary stepped forward to roughly strip them of the elegant clothes, leaving them to put their soaked rags back on before Ray kicked them out. The video ended. I hadn't realized I was crying inconsolably. Beside me, Rosie was also bawling at the atrocity. Frank's tech had lowered his head, unable to keep watching. "These people aren't human, Miss Foster. They're monsters," Frank hissed, his voice loaded with contained rage. He yanked the USB out as if he were holding the deadliest weapon. "This evidence is absolutely flawless. There isn't a defense attorney in this whole country who can keep Derek out of prison with a video as clear as this." I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. The devastation of seeing my son tortured had metamorphosed entirely into an inexhaustible thirst for vengeance. "What's the next step, Frank?" I asked firmly. "Today is the 20th. Frank checked the calendar on his wristwatch. "What day do you usually make the wire transfer to Derek's account?" "The 21st. Without fail. Tomorrow is transfer day." Frank smiled icily. "Perfect. Do not transfer a single cent. Turn your phone off. We are going to cut off his blood supply. As soon as Derek realizes the money isn't coming, he'll panic. He'll need to send an urgent photo to try and blackmail me, and he'll send Ray to look for my parents on the street. But my family is already safe at the motel," I replied, understanding where his plan was heading. "Exactly. When Ray can't find your parents anywhere, Derek's panic will reach its breaking point. They will make a massive mistake. When they are desperate and let their guard down, that is when we will drag them to their ruin, Frank explained. I will prepare the civil lawsuit to freeze their assets and draft the criminal complaint for the LAPD today. I nodded with conviction. Do it! Do it as fast as possible. Tomorrow, Derek's account would be empty. Tomorrow, the house of cards he built on my pain would start to collapse. Enjoy your last night of freedom, Derek, I thought, because tomorrow I will make you beg for mercy at my feet. The 21st? The day I used to mark on the calendar with pride, because it was when I handed over the fruit of an entire month's sweat to my beloved family. But today, the 21st was the death knell for Derek's empire of lies. I was sitting on the bed at the Rest Haven Motel looking at my phone screen, which hadn't stopped lighting up since 6 a.m. Derek's WhatsApp notifications were pouring in relentlessly, followed by dozens of missed calls. I had purposely left the phone on since last night. I only lowered the volume because I wanted to savor every second of that wretch's panic. Good morning, babe. Don't forget today is transfer day. I need to pay the car lease and buy vitamins for my mom. That was his first text at 10 a.m. An hour later, his tone started to change. Lucy, why hasn't the wire hit? Is the bank acting up over there? Please check on it. The dealership is harassing me. By 1 p.m., panic had fully taken over. Calls were coming in every 2 minutes. His messages grew longer, and he was losing his patience. Lucy, where the hell are you? Pick up the phone. I need the money as soon as possible. Valor, Teresa is very sick. We have to take her to the doctor. Don't play games with me. This is life or death. I smiled cynically reading the last message. Life or death. How dared he use that expression when he himself had held a knife to his own flesh and blood's throat? Without typing a single letter in response, I pressed the power button and removed the SIM card from the phone. I snapped the tiny card in two and threw it in the trash. Derek's access to me was completely severed. Let him drown in his own panic. I pulled out my new phone, a number known only to Frank, Lauren, and Rosie. I dialed Rosie's number. She answered on the third ring. Hey, Lucy, Rosie whispered, accompanied by the sound of frying oil in the background. Hi, Rosie. How's the situation at the palace next door? I asked casually. A total meltdown, Lucy, Rosie replied eagerly. This morning I heard Valerie, the nerve of that girl, screaming in the driveway. Turns out her credit card got declined trying to buy stuff online. Then Derek came out, red with rage, and kicked a trash can over. His mother, the witch Rosemary, was also losing her mind because she couldn't pay her regular massage therapist. I blew out a soft breath. And where's Ray? That's what I was getting to, and why I was going to call you. Rosie's tone changed, becoming a bit anxious. Just now, around 11, Derek told Ray to get the van out. I heard him yelling at Ray, "Find those bums until you spot them and bring them back today. If Lucy doesn't get a picture, she's not going to release the money. Bring them back dead or alive. Lucy, be careful. The thug is out looking for your mom and dad. Thanks for the heads up, Rosie. We're safe here. You be careful too," I said before hanging up. I turned my head toward the bed. Hunter was playing with some cheap plastic toy cars I had bought him yesterday. His face was starting to get some color back. My parents were watching TV with the volume low, very calm. The motel was fairly hidden. I was sure that idiot Ray wouldn't find us easily. Mommy, Hunter called me softly. He pointed to the TV screen showing an ice cream commercial. Hunter wants one. Can I? My heart melted. It was the first time my son had asked me for anything since I got back. Until now, he just silently accepted whatever I gave him, not daring to demand anything because he was used to yelling and beatings. Of course, baby, of course you can. I went over and kissed his cheek. Mommy will buy it right across the street. Wait with Grandpa and Grandma. I put on my black baseball cap and mask and grabbed a small coin purse. The nearest convenience store is 7-Eleven was only about 50 yards from the motel's alleyway. I could walk there in less than 2 minutes. The midday sun was scorching. The neighborhood streets were pretty empty. I walked into the 7-Eleven, went straight to the freezers, and grabbed 3 chocolate ice cream bars. I walked toward the register to pay. However, as the cashier scanned the ice cream, my eyes caught a terrifying scene through the store's glass window. A black van braked abruptly in front of a teenager who was organizing shopping carts outside. Out of the driver's side stepped a heavy-set man with a dragon tattoo on his arm. Ray. I felt my heart stop. My blood ran cold down to my toes. My breath hitched in my throat. Ray approached the employee, pulled his phone out of his pocket, and shoved the screen in his face. Although the thick glass muffled the sound, I could read Ray's lips speaking in a threatening tone. Have you seen these two old homeless folks with a kid? They usually beg at the intersection over there, but they've been missing for 2 days. You know them? The store clerk looked at Ray's aggressive face without showing fear. He scratched his head. I don't know, boss. I don't pay much attention to homeless people. Think hard, you little punk. They usually pass by here. Ray yelled, grabbing the kid by the collar of his shirt. Hey, yeah, boss, chill, the kid stammered. I haven't seen them begging, but yesterday afternoon I think I saw a woman leading some old people who looked homeless toward the alley by the Rest Haven Motel. Maybe they sleep there. The world around me seemed to crumble. The stupid employee had just sold out my family's life. Ray let go of him and stared intently toward the alley where my motel was. Without a second thought, he started walking with long strides toward the alley, leaving his van right there. Ma'am, your change, the cashier called, snapping me out of my trance. I grabbed the plastic bag with the ice creams, ignored the change, and sprinted out the side door of the store. I ran around back through a narrow passage behind the shops, running as fast as I could, panting. Cold sweat soaked my back. Run, Lucy, run. I reached the back of the Rest Haven Motel and ran into the lobby. The front desk clerk, who was sleeping and snoring, didn't notice my presence. I bolted up the stairs to the second floor, almost tripping over my own feet. Arriving at my room at the end of the hall, I knocked on the door with the code I had taught my dad. 3 quick knocks, 2 slow ones. I heard the lock turn. As soon as the door opened, I pushed my way in and locked it again. My parents were startled to see me paler than a sheet of paper, panting as if the devil were chasing me. Mom! Dad! Get up, pack everything. Put it in the backpack right now. Hurry, hurry! I ordered, keeping my voice low, trying not to yell so it wouldn't be heard from the hallway. What's wrong, sweetie? My father caught my panic as he saw me haphazardly throwing clothes from the closet into the backpack. Ray, Derek's goon is outside. He knows we're here and he's coming up. Hearing Ray's name, my mother let out a muffled scream. She hugged Hunter tightly. She was shaking so much her teeth chattered. The trauma that had tortured them for 5 years exploded anew in that very instant. Hunter started whimpering, seeing our panic. I pulled out my phone quickly and called Frank. My hands shook from the suffocating fear. Hello, Miss Foster. We have the paperwork, Frank answered. Frank, help me. Derek's thug is at the motel. He found our location. I whispered into the phone's microphone. We're trapped on the 2nd floor. There was the sound of a chair violently scraping on the other end of the line. Frank shifted into crisis mode immediately. Calm down, ma'am. Don't panic. Is the door locked? Yes, but this guy could kick it down at any moment. Frank, if he finds my parents and my son. Listen to me carefully. Frank interrupted firmly. My team and I are heading there right now. We need 10 minutes. Look out the window. Is there any way to escape via a back balcony or a roof? I ran to the window and carefully pulled back the curtain. It overlooked a dead-end alley behind the motel. Below was the corrugated tin roof of an old garage. The drop was about 8 feet too high for my parents to jump without getting hurt, much less with Hunter. We can't, Frank. It's too high, I said desperately. Barely had I finished the sentence when the sound I feared most echoed from the hallway outside. The sound of heavy boots, followed by loud thuds on the doors of the rooms before ours. Open up, I'm searching this room. Open up or I'll kick the door down, roared Ray's raspy, rough voice. There were screams and a door slamming. The thug was brutally checking one room after another. Frank, he's in the hallway. He's checking all of them, I whispered. Tears welled up from the asphyxiating fear. If Ray managed to get in, he wouldn't hesitate to stab anyone. Miss Foster, listen closely. Frank's voice now sounded very cold and calculating. Move your family away from the door. Do not make a single sound. Let him kick the door down. Are you crazy? He has a weapon. Trust me, Frank hissed. Stay behind. Protect your son. I will not let them touch a single hair on your family's heads. The call dropped. I swallowed hard, looking at the wooden door that now seemed as thin as paper. The banging got closer and closer. Room 202. Room 203. Ours was 204, the last one in the hall. I led my dad, mom, and Hunter to the furthest corner of the room, hiding behind the dresser. I grabbed a heavy glass ashtray with my right hand. If that goon came in, I swore I'd smash his head in before he touched my son. The footsteps stopped right in front of our door. A dark shadow was visible through the crack at the bottom. A deathly silence hovered in the air for 2 seconds. Bam! A heavy kick hit my door and the hinges groaned. My mother let out a stifled scream and buried Hunter's face in her chest. Bam! The second kick blew the lock apart. The wooden door burst open violently, hitting the wall with a deafening crash. Standing in the threshold was Ray. His face was feral, his eyes were bloodshot. A long switchblade was already flicked open in his right hand. Seeing my father, my mother, and Hunter huddled in fear in the corner, a demonic smile formed on his lips. Street rats, Ray hissed, walking in and twirling the knife in his hand. His eyes locked onto me with disgust. Ah, so you're the one hiding this trash. Move aside, bitch. Boss Derek sent me to take him back. I stood up, shielding my family, raising the glass ashtray high. My legs were trembling, but I wasn't going to back up an inch. Take one more step and I'll kill you, I screamed. Ray laughed mockingly. He took a step forward, ready to raise his arm to strike me. However, before his foot even touched the floor in front of me, a massive hand reached out of nowhere from the hallway behind Ray, grabbed the thug by the collar of his shirt with superhuman strength, and yanked him backward brutally. Ray went flying out of the room and slammed violently against the hallway wall. His switchblade flew out of his hand. In the now empty doorway appeared Frank Sullivan. The lawyer was breathing slightly heavy. He had taken off his suit jacket and rolled his shirt sleeves up to his elbows. Behind him, 2 huge men from his security team pinned Ray, who was trying to get up, twisting his arms behind his back. Frank looked down at Ray, struggling on the floor, and then calmly adjusted his shirt collar. You picked the wrong enemy, you dime store thug, he said coldly. He turned his head toward me, and his gaze softened. You're safe, Miss Foster. Now, let's go to a place where Derek can never touch them again. Ray's curses and profanities echoed down the motel hallway. The tattooed goon thrashed furiously like a wild dog caught in a trap, but Frank's 2 muscle-bound guys neutralized him quickly, smashing his face against the floor and zip-tying his hands behind his back. Let me go, you bastards. You don't know who you're messing with. The boss is gonna waste all of you. Ray roared, spitting on the floor, his nose bleeding from the impact. Frank, still standing there fixing his shirt, looked at him with utter contempt. He crouched down slowly near the thug's head and said in a very soft but razor-sharp voice, That boss of yours, Derek Nelson, is going to be putting on an orange jumpsuit very soon, and he'll be sleeping on a concrete floor with you. Save your energy for crying in the interrogation room. Frank stood up and looked at me. I was still paralyzed in the corner of the room. My hand, which was still gripping the glass ashtray, shook violently. I was breathing heavily. Behind me, my parents were still holding each other, protecting Hunter, who was crying from fear. Miss Foster, drop the ashtray. You're safe now, Frank said gently, breaking my state of tension. Instantly, the ashtray slipped from my hand and fell with a thud onto the carpet. My knees gave out. I turned around and hugged Hunter with all my might, kissing his tear-streaked face. We're safe, my baby. We're safe, I whispered over and over. My parents were crying too. This time, they weren't tears of fear, but of immense relief. We don't have much time, ma'am, Frank urged. Grab your things. My team will throw this guy in the car. We're going to LAPD headquarters. We will file the official report right now and request police protection. Without wasting time, I slung the backpack I had hastily packed over my shoulder. I took Hunter's hand while my mom and dad followed me at a quick pace. Walking past Ray, who was being dragged by Frank's team, I glared at him with pure hatred. He glared back. But this time I saw a flash of terror in his eyes. He knew he had just stepped into the wrong wolf's den. Waiting at the motel entrance were 2 black SUVs with their engines running. The team threw Ray into the back of the first one. while my family and I got into the second one with Frank. The vehicles sped off through the scorching streets of Los Angeles, leaving the motel and all that panic behind. Inside the car, the air conditioning calmed my racing heartbeat. Hunter had fallen asleep in my lap, exhausted from crying so much. My parents sat silently in the back, still shaken but with much more relieved faces. Frank rode in the passenger seat. He turned toward me. His face had returned to its professional, cold, and calculating mode. "Starting right now, Derek will realize something is wrong," Frank said, opening his tablet. "Ray hasn't come back, and his phone is unreachable because my team confiscated it. Derek will be having a brutal panic attack. If he feels cornered, the worst thing that could happen is he liquidates his assets, sells the house, and flees with the mistress. Then what do we do, Frank?" "Don't let that bastard get away with my money," I asked, worried. "I won't let him," Frank replied. "As soon as we get to the precinct, my civil litigation team will be at the courthouse filing for a preliminary injunction to freeze all assets under Derek and Valerie's names, using the bank evidence verified by Lauren. The judge will freeze their accounts and the deed to the mansion this afternoon. They won't be able to withdraw a single cent or sell anything." I breathed a sigh of relief. "And our job with the police," Frank continued, "is to make sure Derek, his mother, and Valerie are arrested criminally. The thug we have back there is our ace in the hole. Charges of attempted kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon, and child abuse. Those are very serious felonies without the option of bail. The police will act very fast." Half an hour later, we arrived at the massive LAPD headquarters complex. It was bustling, but Frank's presence seemed to have been highly anticipated. He took us straight to the Special Victims Unit, SVU. While Ray was being handed over to criminal detectives along with the confiscated switchblade, we were led to a cold, sterile interview room. I sat across from a female detective who looked at me with empathy, accompanied by a male detective with a thick mustache. Frank sat next to me, stacking a large pile of documents and a USB drive on the table. "Go ahead. Miss Foster, tell me everything from the beginning," the female detective said softly as she turned on the recorder. And so I did. For the umpteenth time, I dug into the wounds of my heart. I recounted everything without omitting any detail, from the embezzlement of my salary and the eviction of my parents, culminating in the torture and the knife threat to my son's neck in exchange for a fake photograph. Every time my voice cracked, Frank handed a document to the detectives. The bank statements, Rosie's written affidavit, and the dozens of fake photos Derek had sent me. The mustached detective frowned, taking notes at top speed. "Excuse me, Miss Foster, regarding the knife threat you mention. Are there any other eyewitnesses besides your parents?" Because no weapon is visible in these photographs, the male detective interjected. It was the key moment. Frank leaned forward, picked up the black USB drive from the table, and handed it to the detective. "We don't just have witnesses, detective. We have the all-seeing eye that recorded everything," Frank said sharply. "Please play the file on this USB. It's security camera footage from Derek's neighbor's house. It was taken on the exact date the photograph was sent to my client." The detective plugged the USB into his computer immediately. He and his partner stared at the monitor. A sudden silence fell over the room. The only sound was the clicking of the mouse. A few seconds later, the demeanor of both detectives changed drastically. The female detective's eyes widened in horror, while her partner's jaw tensed. The cries of my parents being hosed down by Rosemary, Derek's shouts, and finally the crucial moment where Derek put the switchblade to Hunter's neck played out with total clarity before those officers of the law. "Son of a bitch," the male detective muttered, lightly slamming his fist on the desk. "This isn't a simple domestic violence case, counsel. This is clearly premeditated, attempted murder, and brutal child abuse. And the thug executing the physical violence in that video is the one we just handed over to your colleagues outside, along with the exact switchblade seen in the footage," Frank added in a lethal, definitive tone. The female detective stood up instantly. Her empathetic, maternal face had vanished, replaced by the hardness of judicial authority. "We are taking this case in its entirety, Mr. Sullivan. The evidence is overwhelming and irrefutable. Given that a minor's life has been in imminent danger, we are escalating this to an emergency warrant today." The male detective grabbed the phone on his desk. "I'm drawing up an arrest warrant. We're bringing Derek Nelson, Rosemary, and Valerie into the precinct right now. They think they can hide in that rich gated community? We're dragging them out today, Hearing those words, my tears flowed again, but this time they were warm tears. The weight of the mountain crushing my shoulders was lifting. Justice was finally on my side. Miss Foster and her family will be transferred to a police safe house until the suspects are securely in custody, the detective explained, touching my shoulder to comfort me. You have fought incredibly hard, ma'am. Now, let us do our job. That evening, inside a very secure and comfortable safe house, I sat looking at the screen of my new phone. Frank had sent me a short text. The civil injunction was approved by the judge. All of Derek and Valerie's accounts have been officially frozen. The Shangrid of TPD, LAPD is on its way to the house at Block D. Number 8. Prepare yourself, Miss Foster. Tomorrow morning, we will see them face to face in the interrogation room. I sketched a faint smile. An icy smile I never thought I'd possess. Derek, this is your last night sleeping in a luxury bed. Tomorrow, I will personally watch you fall and crumble beyond repair. The morning in the safe house was very quiet, quite a contrast to the storm I was about to unleash today. I stood before the mirror. I pulled my hair back into a high ponytail. There was no trace of tears. The black blouse and dress pants I wore made me feel like a soldier ready to execute the enemy on the battlefield. My mom and dad were on the couch feeding Hunter some fruit. My son's face looked much better. I smiled at him and kissed his forehead. Mommy has to go, baby. I'm going to clean up the bad monsters that scared Hunter. Stay here with Grandpa, Grandma, and the police officers. Be careful, sweetie. Our prayers go with you, my dad said, squeezing my hand tightly. An unmarked police car took me back to the criminal investigation building. Frank was already waiting for me in the lobby in his elegant suit and holding a thick file. His face radiated a silent victory. They're inside, Miss Foster. He greeted me as we walked together down a cold corridor. The cops nabbed them last night when, in a panic, they were trying to pack their bags. Derek tried to resist, but they cuffed him. They're interrogating them in the main room right now. My steps felt agile yet firm. Detective Clara, who had helped us the day before, met us in front of a room featuring a large, two-way mirror. The room we were in was dark, but we had a perfect view of the brightly lit interior. On the other side of the glass sat the three beings who had destroyed my world. Derek, my husband, wore a wrinkled polo shirt. He looked frantic and had dark bags under his eyes. Beside him, his mother, Rosemary, couldn't stop fanning herself with her hand, grumbling incessantly. On the other side, Valerie, the mistress, sat with her legs crossed and an arrogant expression, visibly pissed off that her hair appointment had been ruined. I'm sure this is all the doing of those two homeless bums. Right, detective? Derek's voice came through loud on the speakers in our room. He slammed his hand on the metal table, glaring at the mustached detective sitting calmly across from him. My in-laws are senile, detective. They make up weird stories. They ran away from home because they couldn't handle living with all the comforts I gave them. Oh, really, Mr. Nelson? The detective replied unenthusiastically. Yeah. Obviously. You can't just arrest us for no reason. I am a businessman, an exemplary resident in my community. My wife works overseas. I'm the one who manages all her assets and takes care of her family here. Derek reached into his pocket and pulled out a stack of printed photos I knew perfectly well. He scattered the photos on the table with all the confidence in the world. Look at this, Derek pointed, raising his voice arrogantly. These photos are of my in-laws yesterday morning in clean clothes, eating good food in my own house. Look, who smiles that much if they're being abused? You guys got played by some bums, Rosemary chimed in. That's the truth, officer. My son is the son-in-law any mother would wish for. Lucy is an ungrateful wretch. She left us a mountain of debt. That's why my son has to work himself to death alongside his new girlfriend, Valerie. We are victims of slander. Hearing such repulsive garbage didn't make my blood boil. It froze it completely. The lies they spun had become part of their DNA, turning them into true monsters without a shred of conscience. Detective Clara looked at me and gently touched my shoulder. It's your turn, Miss Foster. Shut their mouths once and for all. The detective opened the interrogation room door from the outside. Frank walked in first, followed by me, stepping with ice-cold detachment. My presence in that room seemed to magically stop time. Derek's eyes bulged so wide they looked like they would pop out of their sockets. His arrogance crumbled instantly, replaced by a terrifying, cadaverous pallor, as if he had seen a ghost. Rosemary stopped fanning herself, and her jaw dropped. Valerie uncrossed her legs and stared at me in confusion and terror. "Hello, Derek. Are you done with your fairy tale?" I shot at him in a very calm but cutting voice. "Lou. Lucy?" Derek stammered, an atrocious tremor in his voice. He stood up instantly, trying to sketch a clumsy smile that looked pathetic. "Oh my God, babe. When did you get back? Why didn't you let me know? I've missed you so much." Derek stepped forward with open arms, wanting to hug me. However, with a piercing glare and an arrogant step backward, I stopped him dead in his tracks. "Don't you even think about touching me with those dirty hands. Murderer." Yes, the word murderer turned him to stone. He swallowed hard, glancing out of the corner of his eye at the detective who was watching him with disgust, and then at Frank, who stood beside me like a wall of steel. "Babe, it's a misunderstanding. I'm sure your dad and mom made up some crazy stories, right? Don't believe them. Look, these photos, they're happy with me." Derek tried to gather the stack of photographs from the table with uncontrollably shaking hands. I stepped up to the interrogation table, grabbed the photos, tore them into 1,000 pieces right in his face, and threw them at his chest. "This script is played out, Derek," I told him with disdain. Then I turned to the fair-skinned woman next to him. "And you must be Valerie. No wonder your credit card was declined yesterday when you were trying to online shop. How does it feel to be poor overnight?" Valerie's eyes widened. You froze my account?" "That's Derek's money. That is money from my sweat, from scrubbing dishes and bathing seniors in Switzerland. You stupid bitch." I yelled. My voice echoed off the walls of the room. Valerie jumped and shrank back in her chair. Rosemary was trembling in terror. Frank took a step forward, dropping the thick file on the table, right under Derek's nose. "My name is Frank Sullivan, attorney for Miss Foster. As of noon yesterday, by court order, all assets in your name and Miss Valerie's name, the house, the cars, and the bank accounts have been frozen and will be seized. You have nothing left but the clothes on your backs. That's impossible," Derek yelled in full panic. His face was red with desperation. "I'll sue you. You have no proof of anything, just the word of some homeless beggars." "We have rights." "You're absolutely right. You do have rights," the mustached detective interrupted in his very deep voice. He pulled a small remote control from his pocket and pointed it at a monitor on the wall. "And the law acts based on the evidence we have, Mr. Nelson." The monitor turned on, and in that precise instant, hell itself rained down on Derek. The security camera footage from the neighbor's house began to play. The scene of Ray dragging my father, Rosemary spraying water on my mother, and Valerie setting up the tripod was displayed in maximum resolution and clear audio. Derek's eyes practically bulged out. He froze, seemingly unable to draw oxygen into his lungs. "Impossible. This is a deep fake," Derek stammered, shaking, almost in a whisper. Beads of sweat the size of marbles broke out on his forehead. "Scrub yourselves good! You stink like garbage!" Rosemary's shrill voice blared from the monitor into the interrogation room. Hearing her own voice torturing two defenseless elderly people, Rosemary's wrinkled face went as white as wax. She clutched her chest as if she were about to have a heart attack. And then came the climax of the video. Derek appeared on screen standing behind my mother's chair, pressing the switchblade to the back of Hunter's neck. 1, 2, 3. "Smile," Derek threatened on the screen. The detective turned off the monitor. Silence returned, but the atmosphere was thick, suffocating, asphyxiating. I leaned toward him, locking my gaze into my husband's empty eyes, which now only reflected the panic of a defeated man. "Do you still want to say it's slander, Derek?" I whispered sharply. "That pet thug of yours, Ray? We already threw him in a cell with your damn switchblade. He sang like a canary and named you as the mastermind of all this." Knowing that Ray had confessed, Derek's defense crumbled like a sandcastle. The arrogant guy's knees gave out until he collapsed onto the metal floor of the interrogation room. He crawled toward me, trying to grab the tip of my shoe with his sweaty hands. "Lucy, forgive me." "Lucy, I went crazy. I'm so sorry. Please, drop the charges." Derek begged, crying at my feet, his snot mixed with his tears in a revolting way. "Think of Hunter, Lucy. I'm his father. Don't send me to prison. Don't you dare utter my son's name with your disgusting mouth." I pulled my foot back in disgust, leaving Derek crying on the concrete floor. Suddenly, Valerie started crying hysterically. She began punching Derek's back as he remained on his knees. "This is your fault, you son of a bitch. You told me it was safe. You told me she was just a dumb immigrant. And now I'm going to end up in jail too. Give me my life back." Valerie screamed, desperately blaming Derek in front of us. Rosemary suddenly slid off her chair, faking a fainting spell, but none of the officers paid her the slightest attention. The performance of this diabolical family had reached its end. The detective stood up and pulled out a pair of steel handcuffs that jingled. "Derek Nelson, Rosemary, and Valerie, based on conclusive legal evidence, from this very moment, you are officially under arrest for the charges of fraud, continuous embezzlement, assault with a deadly weapon, and attempted murder of a minor charges that carry cumulative sentences of over 15 years in prison." Click. The handcuffs closed around Derek's wrists as he sobbed uncontrollably on the floor. I turned around and walked slowly toward the exit, without even looking back. The sound of crying, mutual insults, and desperate screams echoing in the interrogation room sounded like the most beautiful symphony to my ears. My main mission was accomplished. That house of cards had collapsed on its own architect. Now all that was left was to achieve the happiness that had been denied to me for so long. 6 months have passed since then, filled with a long string of exhausting court hearings that drained my emotional energy. However, today the Los Angeles sky was completely clear, as if celebrating the end of my endless storm. I was sitting in the front row at the LA County Courthouse, accompanied by Frank Sullivan, who remained serene and imposing. As usual, sitting at the defendant's table were the 3 beings who had once destroyed my life. Looking at them, it was almost impossible to recognize them. Derek, the husband who was always impeccably groomed and showing off expensive clothes, looked pathetic. His head was almost entirely shaved. He was skeletal, and his gaunt, unkempt face was a sight. The orange prison jumpsuit swallowed him. Beside him, my mother-in-law, Rosemary, looked even worse. Her hair was completely white, her shoulders slumped, and she wouldn't stop looking down with a blank stare, muttering incoherently as if she had lost her mind. And Valerie, that haughty mistress who gave herself airs of grandeur, now looked like a beggar. Her makeup-free face revealed huge, dark bags under her eyes. She hadn't stopped whimpering and sobbing at any point during the entire trial, lamenting her change of fortune. The bang of the judge's gavel echoed through the courtroom. According to the facts proven in the pre-trial phase, witness testimonies, and the legal evidence presented, this court rules. The presiding judge's voice sounded resounding. My heart raced at 1,000 miles an hour, waiting for the sentence that would seal their fate. The court sentences the defendant, Derek Nelson, for the crimes of fraud, continuous embezzlement, domestic violence, and physical and psychological abuse against a minor, to a penalty of 15 years in state prison. Derek covered his face and collapsed onto the table, bawling his eyes out over his fate. The court sentences defendant number 2, Rosemary, for being an accomplice and accessory to child abuse and kidnapping, to a penalty of 8 years in state prison, the judge continued. Rosemary lost her strength and almost fainted in her seat had the bailiffs not held her up. And the court sentences defendant number 3, Valerie, for conspiracy and receiving stolen property from criminal acts, to a penalty of 5 years in state prison. The court orders the immediate forfeiture of the Calabasas estate, the vehicle, and the balances of all frozen accounts seized from the defendants for full restitution to the victim, Miss Lucy Foster. The judge banged his gavel 3 times, and with that, it was over. Justice had been executed perfectly. Tears of joy slid down my cheeks. Frank turned to me and shook my hand with a smile of satisfaction. "Congratulations, Lucy. Our battle is over. Absolute victory. Thank you so much, Frank." "Thank you for everything," I replied, my voice cracking. As the bailiffs began handcuffing and leading the defendants out of the courtroom, Derek stopped for a moment as he passed by me. He fixed me with a pleading look, his bloodshot eyes begging for some pity. "Lucy, I'm sorry. I'm ruined. Lucy," he whispered. I stood up from my chair, returning his gaze with an icy face devoid of emotion. "There is not an ounce of pity left in my heart. You aren't ruined because of me, Derek. You dug your own grave with your own greed and cruelty. Enjoy whatever life you have left behind bars. And don't you ever dare mention my name or my son's name again in your miserable life." Derek lowered his head and started crying even harder as the officers pulled on his arm to drag him out of my sight forever. Behind him, Valerie screamed hysterically, realizing that when she got out after 5 years, she'd end up begging on the streets. Her stolen assets had vanished. By the way, the thug Ray got 12 years at his trial last week. The revenge was finally complete. A month after the final sentencing, the property transfer paperwork and the unfreezing of my funds were completed with the invaluable help of Frank's firm. Today was the day of our true move. The Uber stopped right at the main gate of the Oaks community, Block D, number 8. The ivory white mansion stood imposing, bathed in the soft morning light. But this time, I didn't have to hide behind a palm tree. Now, I walked through the front door as the legitimate owner of that castle. I got out of the car holding little Hunter's hand. My parents followed me. My father walked somewhat hesitantly, and even my mother trembled slightly seeing the gates that had meant a hellish trauma for them. "Lucy." "I'm scared to go in there, honey," my mother whispered, on the verge of tears, gripping my father's arm tightly. I still dream about that time they hosed me down and put the knife to the boy. I turned around and wrapped my arms around my mother's shoulders very tenderly. "Mom, look me in the eyes. We tore that hell down. We've locked the demons in a cage. I paid for this house with clean money, earned with my hard work. And thanks to your prayers all these years, there are no bad memories here anymore. Starting today, we erase those traumas, and we are going to fill this house with our own happiness." My father nodded with a faint smile, patting my mother's hand. "Our daughter is right. We won, and this is our grandson's house now. That miserable man will never hurt us again." I pulled the keys, which had a little stuffed bunny keychain on them, from my purse. I unlocked the deadbolt and pushed the front door open. A fresh breeze welcomed us. The cleaning service I hired a couple of days ago had left it sparkling. I sold every single belonging of Derek, Rosemary, and Valerie at dirt cheap prices, donating the proceeds to a local city orphanage. I bought completely new furniture to be absolutely certain that not a single trace, shadow, or scent of them remained in this house. Stepping into the massive family room, Hunter let go of my hand. My little boy, who not long ago was just skin and bones, was healthy and energetic again. His cheeks were round once more, his skin glowed, and his little eyes shined with the natural joy of a boy his age. He ran around the sofa, laughing as he discovered the huge TV in the living room. "Mommy, this house is huge. Hunter can play soccer in here, right?" he exclaimed, overjoyed. His pure laughter echoed through the entire living space, as if his giggles purified all the bad vibes and darkness soaked into those walls. Hearing her grandson laugh so happily, my mother's tears of fear turned into tears of pure emotion. My father let out a laugh too. He grabbed my mother from behind, and they started walking slowly through the brand-new, spotless kitchen. My heart swelled with joy. Seeing this sight made killing myself working in Switzerland entirely worth it. That same afternoon, we organized a special early dinner to christen the house. Lauren came and brought a huge cake that read, "Welcome home, champion." After her, Rosie walked in loaded with plates of amazing diner food she had made at her restaurant. Even Frank took some time out of his day to come and congratulate us. Our spacious open-concept living area was now a hive of jokes, laughter, and an aura of absolute, sincere happiness. We ate, giving thanks that we could finally taste freedom, completely stripped of the chains of a tortuous past. Night fell, and our friends gradually left for their respective homes. My parents had gone to sleep in the master bedroom on the first floor, which I had decided to give them so they wouldn't have to climb stairs. Hunter, hugging his new pillow, slept like an angel, smiling softly in his new bedroom filled with toys. I walked out to the side yard, a patio with paved stone and high walls. Exactly the corner where my own family suffered abuse and humiliation for a single purpose: to coerce me. I turned the exterior lights all the way up. I placed 2 pots with beautiful white orchids in a corner of the patio. A pleasant, soft night breeze caressed my face. I stood rooted in the exact spot where Derek put the knife to my son. But my heart no longer beat 1,000 miles an hour fueled by rage or fear. On the contrary, I felt an immense tranquility inside and a vast ocean of peace. I lifted my head, watching the stars shine in a clear, cloudless sky. The half-decade of suffering while working far away, combined with the backstabbing betrayal of my then-husband, had chiseled me into an unbeatable, indomitable woman. I know now that sometimes God allows a storm to destroy our apparent home so we can glimpse what kind of demons took refuge there, and to equip us with the courage to banish them for eternity. I'm home now, my baby Hunter. Mommy is here, and no one will ever separate us again, I whispered to the night wind. I turned around. I stepped back into the warmth of our home and securely locked the back door's deadbolt. My odyssey through the gloomy valleys of the past was closed. Dawn was breaking on a new day where, from now on, I will display a genuine smile. A smile I will never have to fake under any blackmail, a comforting ending, and a beginning overflowing with hope.